One of the most scenic and historic routes that Amtrak operates today is the Capitol Limited. With a history dating all the way back to 1923, this train still offers travelers views of some of the most beautiful mountain passes and rolling farmland that America has to offer. Join us as we take a look through time at this iconic American train. Amtrak's Capitol Limited now travels daily between Washington, D.C. and Chicago, Illinois. The Capitol takes its name from the flagship train of the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, Amtrak's predecessor company on this route. The Baltimore and Ohio Capitol Limited's original route took passengers all the way from New York City to Chicago by way of Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. After passengers boarded buses in Manhattan and were taken to New Jersey by ferry, the B&O train then departed from the Communipaw Terminal in Jersey City for Washington, D.C. and Chicago. Today, Amtrak's Capitol Limited only travels between Washington, D.C. and Chicago, with Acela and Northeast Regional trains providing the connection to New York City. From Washington, Amtrak's modern Capitol Limited follows much of its original route to Pittsburgh. From there, the train abandons the old B&O right-of-way and travels over trackage originally owned by the Pennsylvania Railroad to Cleveland, which was not served by the B&O Capitol. From Cleveland, the train then follows the route of the old New York Central to Chicago, a route that is now shared with Amtrak's Lakeshore Limited. We begin our journey today in 1969 as we see several iterations of the Capitol Limited, all the way from the final days of the B&O Railroad until now. A little more than a year and a half before the creation of Amtrak, a westbound Baltimore and Ohio Capitol Limited arrives into Silver Spring, Maryland. Now only a few days before Amtrak was to begin operations and the B&O would stop running the Capitol, one of the final westbound trains crawls through Silver Spring on April 27th of 1971. 2 days before Amtrak took over U.S. passenger operations, the B&O ran a special commemorative version of the Capitol using all of the best equipment. This commemorative Capitol is seen here, westbound at Silver Spring, Maryland on April 29, 1971. Instead of originating in D.C., this special edition of the Capitol started its journey at Camden Station in Baltimore before traveling south to D.C., backing into Union Station, and then continuing on to Chicago. The next day, the very last eastbound regular Capitol Limited rolls through Silver Spring on its way to Washington. It is now May 1st, the first day of Amtrak, and the commemorative Capitol is completing its eastbound run, pulling into Silver Spring, Maryland prior to its arrival in Washington. After setting out the baggage car and dining car in D.C., which Amtrak was to use the following day for their service, the special is seen here on its final leg as it passes through Berwyn, Maryland, heading for its final stop in Baltimore. After this day, it would be about another decade until the Capitol Limited rode the rails once again. Amtrak did not run the Capitol Limited for its first 10 years. Instead, passengers traveling from D.C. to Chicago could make connection with the New York to Chicago Broadway Limited at Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. When Amtrak finally revived the Capitol in the early 80s, it was equipped with heritage cars and Amfleet coaches, similar to the Broadway Limited, which is seen here. Unlike the Broadway, the Capitol often ran with a heritage dome car. The Broadway could not, since it had to travel through the Hudson River tunnels in New York City. We check in with the Capitol Limited again in the year 2000 as it travels through Rockville, Maryland. Note the multiple material handling cars on the rear of the train from the days when Amtrak still carried Mail and Express, a service that was discontinued in 2004. The westbound Capitol arrives in Rockville, Maryland in August of 2000. As Amtrak began taking delivery of its own equipment in the 1990s, the Capitol was re-equipped with superliners and General Electric Genesis engines. At this time, Amtrak was still hauling large numbers of so-called material handling cars behind their trains. The Capitol looks much the same today as it did in the early 2000s, with the exception of new paint schemes and new Viewliner 2 baggage cars. The Westbound Capitol eases past the old B&O station at Point of Rocks, Maryland. Baggage cars and sightseer lounges were pulled from the consist during this time due to the COVID-19 pandemic. As of the airing of this episode, they have yet to return. The Eastbound Capitol flies through Kensington, Maryland on its way to Washington. After making its station stop in Rockville, the Capitol races through Gaithesburg, Maryland, bound for Chicago. Head on over to railweekly.com and check out our online store to support the channel. And please subscribe for free if you haven't already. Thank you for watching.